Dun, 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 dun. Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts, sir. Dun, 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 dun. I'm pretending I'm an FBI agent. FBI agent Mindfulness Sherpa here, aka Sierra Brand Cantrell. I am joined by Amy Yakowski, and I'm also joined by Rob Hunter. And we are talking about speak just the facts about others. We are in week 49 of our journey, a handbook for new Stoics, as shown here. And Epictetus reminds us, we often don't know enough about another person's journey or where they're at, their personal history, to arrive at reasonable judgments. So this week they're telling us to just focus on the facts. I immediately thought of like the FBI and Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am, because that really helped get me into that mindset of just the facts. Or if you love Parks and Rec like I do, you can think about the cop character and think about how cops would explain a situation, not emotionally, just the facts. All right, guys, secret agents, what did you think about this week's lesson?
Oh, well, it definitely made me channel my own Burt Macklin for sure. I thought this was great. They right out the gate, they say that most of they call them value judgments, basically those initial judgments or thoughts or we'll say labels that you can assign to someone and their behavior. They're usually false or they're ill-informed, right? You don't have all of the facts. And it's what often can lead to, outbursts, or as they call them, passions, and the more extreme emotions. And those can over time be unhealthy, as we've been looking at these last several weeks, especially when it comes to anger. Not just the effects of anger when it comes to relationships that you have, if you're lashing out at someone or you're yelling at someone, but also the physical manifestations that we talked about with anger and how it can really hijack your immune system for quite a significant amount of time. So I thought this was great. And I love it because it builds on what we've been learning the last couple of weeks. We started by decomposing our desires, our passions from a positive sense. If we think about our, fermented foot juice as our wine, or the functional discharge that Marcus Aurelius talks about when it comes to sex. Those, we started by decomposing those to make them less desirable. And then we flipped and we started to think about the things that we avoid and decompose those a little bit. So that way it becomes a little bit easier to digest. And now they're taking it one step further and saying, okay, you've done it with things and stuff. Now let's pivot and do it with people and the way you are prejudging what people are or aren't doing.
What I love about this is it comes down to communication. So that's my area of expertise. That's what I've done my entire life, my entire career. I've been a communicator. But you never really think about, at least I didn't, I can't speak for everybody, how you communicate with yourself matters. What language you pick to describe yourself, others in this circumstance, what you put judgments on is so important, but you can change it. Get back to this good Stoic principle, the dichotomy of control. I just love this idea that with control comes freedom. Freedom from those judgments, because oftentimes, as Amy just said, they're negative. And I don't want to live in a negative space. So being in control and thinking to myself, oh, I just judged that thing or that person. Why? What's the judgment about? And how can I let it go? Because most of the time, I'm wrong, just like they say right here. Most of the value judgments we make are false, is a fundamental Stoic tenet. So this was a nice reminder to try to pay attention and catch as many judgments as you can, as I tried to do this week.
They give the example of somebody cutting you off in traffic. And they say that, to think about, remember somebody who cut you off, instead of thinking that jerk cut me off, say something more neutral, like someone is in a hurry to get somewhere. because that's the fact. That person is in a hurry to get somewhere. And they bring up, we don't know if that person is having a horrible day. We don't know if that person is rushing to get to a hospital to see a family member who is hurt. Or you don't know if that person has a woman in labor in the back seat that you're trying to get to the hospital. You don't know. So they say if you stick to the facts of that person is in a hurry to get somewhere, keep it neutral, keep it just the facts. That's our exercise for the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved it. It made me think of a couple things that actually all of us in some way touch on in our mindful mastery programs that we have. You know, Sierra, for you and radical mindfulness, it made me think of where you talk about the absolute truth. You know, say things as they truly are and focus on, you know, the positive, if you will, versus that negative component. And Rob, it made me think of, for you, how you talk about when you flip the script, right? So flip the script on those automatic thoughts, on that language that sometimes, you know, we are human beings. We have our experiences that automatically we have these things that pop in, but it's what you choose to then do with that, how you choose to process that information that makes the difference. And then when it comes to teams, when I talk about with teamwork, it's that power of perspective, right? It's so funny how most of the analogies that we use in our programs is about traffic, because traffic and cars, those seem to be the thing where we sometimes get the most upset, have the least control, and know the least of what's going on, right? We are literally contained in our own bubbles as we're cruising through a parking lot, a highway, down the road, whatever. And that power of perspective, you know, I talk about that fried green tomatoes analogy, and not necessarily knowing, did this person, quote unquote, steal your spot? Or did they simply not see you? Or did you actually take their spot? You know, were you going to take what they were already seeing? You have no idea. You don't know the perspective. You don't know what people are going through in that moment. And, you know, it was interesting. It was back when back in May of 2020, when the George Floyd incident happened. And I remember specifically there was an interview that Dave Chappelle gave. And it was very interesting because the person who was interviewing him, I think it was maybe David Letterman, and he was asking him, well, don't you think this is terrible? Don't you think this is wrong? And Dave basically, he took a very stoic approach to it. He said, I don't know. I can't speak to the situation or the thoughts that were going on in those officers' minds. So I can't judge him because I don't know what he was or wasn't thinking.
And the other cops that were standing around.
And the other cops. He took that stance of, I don't know. I was not in that situation, so I can't judge what somebody else did or didn't do because I don't know what was going on in their mind. So I thought that was really interesting because he wasn't allowing the interviewer to goad him into giving this is an outrage response. Right.
But he also was willing to be honest with his response instead of just taking the easy path and saying, yeah, I'm pissed off. Mm-hmm. Because that's what culture rewards right now. It doesn't reward the person who doesn't have the opinion on the thing.
Well, he can be pissed off he can be angry about the situation because he did have that YouTube video where he was angry about the situation. But at the same time, he recognized that it's not his role to judge what someone else's behavior was, because just like you said, he doesn't know all the facts. He doesn't know all the things that led up to it or what was going on in that person's mind at the time. So I love this, but it is funny how traffic seems to be our repeated analogy. I like how they say it's almost when you observe it as if it was a camera, or let's say even observe it as if it was a computer. A computer can't determine if, you know, this person was a jerk. A camera doesn't decipher that. A camera just sees what is actually happening and breaking it down.
But a camera is even still, I mean, a camera only sees a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't see more than a moment. It only captures one still shot. So we're always revolving. And as Sarah talks about in Radical Mindfulness, her program here at Pain to Port Strategies, your automatic go-to is those survival responses. What the Stoics do and what this lesson does, week 49, speak just the facts, is to follow up on those breakdowns, like you said, Amy, to now we're talking judgments. Break down that judgment so that it's just, what do I know? Not much.
Not much.
Because I don't know what the other person's motives are, like your Chappelle example, which is good job. Good job tying that in here. Anytime we can talk about Dave Chappelle today.
So here's the question for you guys personally for this week. How did this impact how you looked at things? Was it helpful? Did you remember using it in any specific way?
I've made it a game to try to catch my judgments. So it's I'm like, ooh, a judgment. And I try to entertain myself with that judgment so it becomes easier to view it from like a 30,000-foot view. So, ooh, look at what I am doing here. Why am I doing this? And that has helped me quite a bit. Not perfect. I talk about politics for a living and my day job. It's hardest for me to withhold judgments based on politics because I'm incredibly cynical when it comes to politics. And sometimes that bleeds out, but I'm becoming much more aware of it.
I think the key is really just trying to create that neutrality, right? These thoughts happen, they're automatic. We can't stop that immediate judgment that pops in our mind. It's just built within our DNA and our life experiences to date. However, again, using that as a cue before you then choose a response or a reaction. And that's really important, whether you're in traffic or whether you are dealing with a difficult family member, or even if you're part of a team, right? Those teams, there are so many presumptions that just can happen, that can corrupt and interrupt your ability to move forward successfully together. There's so often, well, she doesn't like me, or, he never listens to me, or whatever the reason may be, that, jumping to that conclusion is never going to serve you effectively, and using it as a trigger, to your point, Rob, to just pause and say, okay, what do I actually know about this? What do I really know? Back to your point, Sierra, put on your cop hat and your badge, because just the facts are going to be what is going to help you better find control. And to your point, Rob, the irony of the freedom from control, through control, being able to better interact and engage with other people and not be a miserable coot your whole life.
Plus, when you judge less, you feel better. Just your body feels better. That's one of the things I've noticed.
I love the idea of making it a game to catch your judgments. I love that. Oh, look at that. And you're looking at it objectively, right?
Yeah, I mean, that I love that way to play it, Rob, because then it becomes less of a have to and more of a get to. So by turning it into a game, and it ultimately is a way to, again, regain that control, but more importantly, I think to your core point, Rob, gaining control of the language. Gaining control of the language that you use, the language that you think.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have a transformational change in your life when you shift your focus from good versus bad to neutral language.
I 100% agree. Because the other part that stood out to me this week is, in playing this game and becoming more aware of judgments and then breaking them down for what they are, you also become aware of other people's judgments too. And you can break them down in a way, right? So if you're receiving a judgment, if you're on the other end of a judgment, this lesson can help you too, because it can also create a little bit of distance so that maybe it doesn't sting as much, because you realize, oh, that person is judging me incorrectly. You can determine how you want to respond.
Right.
You go, oh, that is interesting feedback.
Or as Wayne Ram likes to say, curious.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was fantastic exercise this really helps us kind of get a more neutral viewpoint once we step back and we think about it, just the facts, or as a camera would see it. This is a great practice, and I intend to come back to this many times and then remind myself to come back to it again and remind myself to come back to it again. I thought this was really helpful, and great job for everybody, working through this. This is not the easiest thing to do, especially when you're feeling heated about something. So I think that about wraps us up for this week. This is week 49, just the facts about others. If you haven't already, make sure you are following us on our YouTube channel so that you can catch up with us. We do this every week, a handbook for new Stoics. And we're nearly done, you guys. We're only have a few weeks left, which is exciting. So make sure you follow us. If you want more information about the programs that we offer, you can find us on www.paintedporchstrategies.com. And I'm sorry, I just got to do the song one more time. Dun, 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 dun. Just the fact.